Parliament. But we saw it today, the far left going as far as to call for the suspension of free trade talks with the United States. Even Atlantist lawmakers, those who love America, like former Chirac consultant Pierre Lelouch, are critical.
I was foreign trade minister at the time, so there is the question of France's industrial interests. It seems to me that this really requires a fairly virulent protest to the Americans. Obama has to explain himself and apologize, and after that there has to be a code of conduct which states that between democratic societies we don't do this kind of thing.
All right, Louis Bernard, part one of our discussion, you poured cold water on the concept of a code of conduct for spies. Spies will spy no matter what. But what about this issue, which perhaps we overlook? We're hearing a bit of the gossip and rumors that have come out from WikiLeaks about big policy decisions. But this was the former trade minister, and he's complaining about industrial espionage.
Which is a completely different thing, absolutely. And of course, Pierre Lelouch will not be happy to know, by reading the papers this morning, that his own phone was tapped. So of course, going on the air, he was not very happy about it. It's actually very important what the far left is saying to stop the negotiation on the free trade agreement. The far left is always going to ask for the stopping of the negotiation on the free trade agreement, taking everything. And obviously, it's not in France's hands, but of course at the European Commission level. But more to that, these are complex negotiations which have a lot to do with intellectual property, with accesses to markets for rivals like Boeing and Airbus, which were neck to neck last week in the Paris Air Show. All this has to be kept a secret before it opens, and to have the idea that it was all listened to by the Americans is a bit scary. But again, inside Europe, you see that happening between allies. I mean, reports have...
And it works both ways. We all remember what it was the old days where U.S. executives were advised by the State Department not to fly Air France because their seats might be bugged.
Exactly. On the Concorde, I seem to remember that. And of course they would. I don't know what is happening with the French Secret Service or the French spies all over the world, especially in countries we tend to talk about as partners, but we also consider a little bit as vassals. So I wouldn't say too much about the code of conduct of the French spying services themselves.
It works both ways, but will it impact, Etienne Droual, those free trade negotiations?
No, because we put out of the scope of these negotiations any privacy-related question first, because the Europeans didn't want to include privacy in this mutual recognition system, because we have another vision of privacy. Another thing that strikes me is
I guess we could call that the Google clause.
Oh, yes. When we want to find an adversary, we would say Google, but it's not the case. It's not only Google. Finally, there will be no discussion on privacy between the US and Europe, also for national security issues, because states don't want to limit themselves on this. So there is a mutual rejection on any agreement between democracies on the fact that they would not spy each other. And for me, this is a strategic mistake from Mr. Lelouch to say that among democracies, we should have a code of conduct. The US government is reliable before US citizens, and it is a democracy. The same for France. It doesn't mean that there is no spy. It will never end. Not the question. It's not a question of fairness. Today, for French people, it's a question of being ashamed of the situation when it is on your face in the news and you are at the office or in charge of an action for the French citizen. Yes.
I was going to ask you about that, because what did we see today? We saw a summoning of the ambassador, a telephone call, a special cabinet meeting that took place. Now, for things that the Americans insist the French knew about since 2013. So why all this reaction in that case?
Gestures.
Sure.
Honor and gestures. Yeah. We will see in 2 weeks what happens. And I guess, and this is just a small effect, a little effect of that, is to train these people on privacy issues. These people are governments, people, representatives, etc., to inform them that what they have in their pocket, the way they are moving, is not a matter of public information.
It's been 2 years since Edward Snowden's revelations. Would you say it's still the case that
takes time,
the man who now occupies Monsieur Lelouch's job still isn't quite aware of what he should be not saying and not saying on the phone?
Exactly. You always need pain to be trained. And this is what happens now. I hope so. At least if it has this effect, this would be something positive.
And there's also a sort of parallel debate here on the sort of tech side as to exactly which types of phones the leader should be using, because, you know, there's been a debate. When Barack Obama first came into power, he wanted to keep his BlackBerry phone. And his advisors all said, Mr. President, we know you like your phone, but if you're going to keep a phone, we have to sort of rebuild it for you. We have to encrypt it. He does still have a phone that looks like a BlackBerry, but it isn't. It's a phone made sort of by the Secret Service for him. So he feels like he's holding a BlackBerry, but it's probably the most secure phone in the world. And all of his cabinet ministers have similar phones. In France, from the reports we hear, depending on who you read, some of the ministers use secure encrypted phones, but they're more difficult to use. The technology is a little difficult. Some ministers are less technologically sophisticated. It's easier sometimes to fall back and rely on your personal phone. It might be unbelievable, given all these revelations, that some people would still use their personal phones for any communications, but it does happen from time to time, even if the trend is more and more towards that more safeguarded technology, the encrypted phones, which anyone in any high-level position of power would be using.
Are the French learning, Senator? Are they getting better at this?
Repeat, sorry, my question.
Are they getting better at being careful?
I think you have a problem, like you say. For the honor of the France, you need to take decisions. And I think you need to do like Merkel in 2014, when she decided to allow the chief of the Secret Service of Berlin. You need to take a decision like this, as the first. For the future, it is a question, for the future, I feel it depends on the technology, because Americans are very strong in technology. I don't know if in France we are so strong than the American.
I think there is no technical gap. It's a matter of awareness. President Obama is the first one on this planet saying that data security issues are greater than terrorism. And he's right. It's a matter of being aware of it.
It's a question of awareness. I mean, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was using her own email for business or for official work. The chief of the army in the U.S., General Petraeus, was using Google Mail to talk to his mistress. So and he knows one thing or two about encryption and online security. So it's a question of awareness, and it's a question of not doing stupid things with the technology. But the technology is available, it's definitely for the French government ministers to use if they want to go full black on communication. They could tomorrow. We have the systems in the ministries. It's just that it's a question of awareness and of the use is a little bit more tricky.
So what is the impact of Edward Snowden and of WikiLeaks? What is the impact on the world we live in? On your job as a risk consultant?
Well, France is shocking, I think. It's a problem in France. Because the French see this and they say, oh, it's not possible. Yeah. I think it's a very big problem. And the French say, oh, when you make politics, when you make affairs, you know that you are war, commercial war, and you know that you stand there. But the people say, oh, it's possible. Americans are France. And they do this. What is possible? I think it's a big problem for public opinion in France.
It's a wake-up call for the public opinion. It's completely right. If our allies do this to us, first, what would the people who are not our allies do to us in terms of listening in? And obviously there is a lot going on that side. And possibly what are we doing ourselves? It's a question of awareness. Every time there is a story in France about a security breach, like those celebrities' nude pictures on iCloud, the stupid idea to put your nude pictures on iCloud when you're a celebrity. People go, oh, is it that easy to hack? Yes, it is. And everybody is a victim. And when the victim is the head of state, of course it makes a reform. And to go back to what you said.
So you're a tech-savvy guy, and that hasn't had the Snowden revelations haven't had a big impact on you personally.
Not as much as you would have thought back then. Not at all.
Etienne Drouin?
Did it change my behavior? Yes. Yes, it's a matter of competition. It's a matter of sovereignty. And now we know that we may be part of this warfare in technological spying, espionage, and economic warfare.
Does it change the way you see the United States?
No, that's the way I see differently the world where we are in France and in the US with these technologies without any territory and not any, I would say, global convention on how to have policymakers being efficient in any place of this planet with these remote systems.
The day that all this is coming out, the Pew Research Center in the United States putting out a survey looking at the image of the United States, and you know what? It's not bad at all. In polling in 40 countries, finding that nearly 7 out of 10 inhabitants of this fair planet have a favorable view of the United States. What's interesting is when you look more closely at the numbers, for instance, at Europe, there's definitely a whistleblower effect on perception of whether the U.S. respects the personal freedoms of its own citizens. Note that at the bottom of that list, Douglas Herbert, is Germany, where the outrage over spying has been the greatest.
Yeah, and you can understand why, because obviously we were just, a little over a year ago talking about the tapping of Angela Merkel's phone, which provoked an outcry which echoes the one we're hearing today. And, what's interesting is back then when you had the broader debate over the NSA, a dragnet over all of this European metadata. Back then, François Hollande was indignant, and he used the terms, he said, this is totally unacceptable. Those are his words. It was, I believe, 2013. You could check the dates after. Today, what was the statement out of the Defense Council? The word was, this is unacceptable. There's almost a ritualistic sense of repetition in the way, the way we go about reacting to these sort of crises here. Germany, obviously, they're still having parliamentary hearings on the fallout from the NSA revelations regarding the wiretapping of Angela Merkel's phone and other Germans as well. That's not over yet. So Germans, and obviously knowing German history, their history, the former East Germany and the Stasi police, they have an extremely, especially older Germans, an extremely wary, distrustful relationship to anyone who purports to have a little bit of insight or view into your private life, into your own personal data. So Germany is a particular case for more reasons than one.
All right, reactions again coming in from the viewers, and some agreeing with Doug, some going further. One person saying, we owe much to Edward Snowden. I want France to grant him asylum. Senator, should Edward Snowden be granted asylum in France?
Sorry?
Should Edward Snowden be granted asylum here in France?
Yes. May I say yes? Because I signed 10 months ago a petition that Snowden can come in France and Assange can come in France. I say yes.
And France has a long history of welcoming whistleblowers or political activists for the greater good in France. And in that particular case of Edward Snowden, it was a big no for France. Maybe
I was going to say 2 years ago when he landed in Moscow, it was no way.
It is. Yeah. And it is. I think it is better if it was in France than in Russia.
Yes, but now I think it's too late. We could not recycle Edward Snowden in France after he has been hosted by Putin. I mean, it would be a mistake. Yeah. We should have done first, just for the period he would need. But after Putin, it means that you can recycle any wrongdoer to the U.S.
But hang on, this is a man wanted for treason in the United States. What we're witnessing today between Obama and Hollande is a minor embarrassment, the summoning of an ambassador. Can you imagine the row if France had granted asylum to Edward Snowden with Washington?
It would be a huge mistake.
Now it would. But back then, the debate was not as fierce as it might have been. And a lot of people, like yourself, Senator, were saying, yeah, but we have a long tradition of doing this in France. Sure. And sometimes not everybody is happy about it, but you have a freedom fighter, freedom fighter, the new kind of freedom fighter. And why don't we let him in? I do agree with the idea that after 2 years in Moscow, it's a completely different different political sign to now grant him asylum.
I think it's just
There has been certainly a Snowden effect on the United States with the Congress curtailing some of the rules under which intelligence can be gathered.
They've revised the Patriot Act, yes.
But it applies for U.S. citizens.
And this is the irony of this whole debate. The U.S. has taken a close look, some would say not close enough, at their own rules that were passed in the wake of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And they've revised them. They've tried to put in a few more constraints, a few more safeguards, constitutional freedoms. But it only does, like you said, apply to Americans and domestic audience there. The whole debate that the U.S. Congress just had over the revision of the Patriot Act had nothing to do with Europeans, had nothing to do with anyone or anything we've been talking about on tonight's show. And it's interesting, I'll just add one other thing. In February 2014, when François Hollande was in Washington on that state visit, I remember they were standing there in the White House briefing room giving a joint press conference. And at the time, Barack Obama, and this surprised many people, he said, there are no countries that the U.S. will have a no-spy agreement with. You had a U.S. president standing there and basically saying, no, we refuse to guarantee we will not spy on you. A no-spy agreement is what France would like, is what Germany would like. They're not going to get it. So far, Germany's still hoping to talk to the U.S. about it. The U.S. is essentially saying, we won't maybe spy on your top leaders. We will make sure that our security agencies are curtailed a bit and reined in. But the U.S. is saying, no, spying is a reality of the modern world. We need to spy. You spy, I spy. There are no friends. There are no enemies, just interests of nations. And we're going to continue doing it. No spy agreements.
So, Etienne Drouin, again, the irony is that on the day when there's all this outrage over what's going on, over these new French leaks, as it were, the French Parliament has just approved a bill that basically gives more spying powers to its services.
Exactly. Let's put a name on the territories. Patriot Act means the US. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, adopted in 1978 by the US, covers the rest of the world, and we are still under this regime as foreign countries. The French law on intelligence covers French territory, and it is absolutely silent about foreign intelligence.
Yes.
It is a choice. It is a choice that the French government owes to French citizens. And finally, we do the same. This is why this news is revealed today.
Senator, should France be different? Should it regulate the way it spies on the rest of the world?
Secret.
No comment.
No comment. Because I can say that it's a problem, things. It's a problem for democracy, the technology. Me, I vote against the law in France because it's a very big problem for the privacy and it's a very problem for all the people who live in democracy. We can continue like this. We need to think about this and to find with the contact with all the control of the president decide, no, we can continue like this. It's not no more for democracy.
Even after the Paris terror attacks?
We can do this. The Secret Service are here. They can do. We don't know it. They need to do it.
Louis, now?
The debate will always be if security services, through wiretapping, would have known about the terrorist attacks in Paris just before and prevented it, everybody would applaud. But you would say that they did do a lot of wiretapping and it didn't stop the attacks from happening. Same, the Patriot Act didn't stop Boston and all this. So it's always the debate. Of course, in a realistic world, you will have to have some kind of spying, and France is not going to single-handedly stop every spying. You should not expect this at all.
All right, the final word from Nicolas on Twitter. We spy, but so do the French, Germans, British, Chinese, and the Russians. Everyone spies on everyone. Louis Bernard, Douglas Herbert, Etienne Drouin, and Yves Pozzo di Borgo, thank you very much for being with us. Stay with us, gentlemen. Our Media Watch segment is next. We say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. Of course, it's the front page of every newspaper in France this morning. Sur écoute, being listened in on the last three French presidents. That's the front page of Libération this morning. So a very, very dramatic news. It's also being riffed on social media, as we saw when Merkel was being listened in on, etc. Yes, we scan, and Obama's ear has been given a little bit of the magnifying glass treatment there as well. So, of course, this is always boiled down to the heads of state in each case, as if Obama himself is the one listening in on the various personalities. So that's Twitter for you, I suppose, simplifying matters. Sarkozy, I have a joke to tell you, and Barack Obama saying, well, I already know it. So we've seen these jokes trotted out online since the whole NSA scandal first.
The ones are the best.
François. I quite like this one. This is Peter, an NSA agent over at the embassy on Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, a little bit bored listening in on François Hollande. Perhaps not all of his conversations are as interesting as Nicolas Sarkozy's, some might argue. This is one cartoon showing the NSA, I suppose, taking over the top of the Eiffel Tower there with the three previous French presidents.
A bit violent.
Hanging on phone lines. It is very violent indeed.
Nice for French, this.
Right? Yeah. Saying, well, at least we're considered as important as the Germans. So I suppose some French national pride coming in there in that particular cartoon. This article by Bruno Roger Petit has been getting a certain amount of discussion on social media as well, wondering, will Nicolas Sarkozy fare the worst in all of this? Of course, two left-wing media behind these revelations. And we haven't heard everything that's going to come out of them yet. Will Nicolas Sarkozy suffer more than Barack Obama in terms of his image? That's a question that can be asked.
By the way, before we went on air, the always diligent Douglas Herbert went and did a check of how the U.S. media is covering this.
Now you're going to have to make me go to my notes here, François, but it's true. On most of the big morning media shows in the U.S., it barely even registered. On one of them, I believe it was the CBS network, it wasn't even in the top 8 stories. One of the big stories in the U.S. was whether now Barack Obama will allow families to pay perhaps ransom to release hostages. There was another big story about a prisoner used the tools to escape from prison, was smuggled in hamburger meat.
Right. Well,
so that was really
I think
big.
we're dealing with leaks fatigue. We've had Saudi leaks,
absolutely.
now France leaks.
So it just wasn't,
this
it
has
wasn't
already
on the
happened
radar
with
that
Germany.
much.
I mean, I think we're not discovering anything we didn't already know in the broad sweeps in any case. Another point made by Bruno Roger Petit there as well is on a related point, it's incredible to see journalists acting surprised about all of this. And I think one tweet that illustrates this, US spied on French presidents from a secret spy nest on top of the embassy. And you can see this image here through the trees of the top floor of the US embassy. First of all, to put it bluntly, obviously, embassies have been used as spying for espionage forever. And second of all, in an era of satellite technology and all of that, is it really that surprising that an embassy down the street from the presidential palace would be used? Which?
A drone again.
Right, exactly. I mean,
but it is the point that we were making. We have to differentiate between, and I believe it was you, Etienne, who made the point, that we have to differentiate between what experts who follow this all the time know and a wider audience who perhaps isn't keenly following all of
That's right. And I think in terms of, I suppose, to pick up on that, I think you have this article in the Huffington, I think it's in the Huffington Post, François Hollande reacting a minima, or a minimal reaction, for fear of internal criticism. So I suppose that minimal reaction, you could also say, is recognition of the fact that this is already understood, that this happens. We're going through the motions of pointing the finger of blame. And politicians, I think, are playing that game. You've got Alain Juppé, a very seasoned politician, former foreign minister, saying that this is unacceptable. 3 former presidents who have been listened in on. Again, I'm sure Alain Juppé was well aware that this already happened.
You just showed the senator's tweet. Let's have a look at it.
Oh, right. Hold on. Where is it? Oh, this is your tweet. I didn't even realize.
It's an autograph foot.
Yes, one second.
Spelling mistakes. That's okay. It's in French.
Okay.
Well, yes, some saying perhaps if we're to be serious about this, but isn't it true? If we were to be serious about it,
read what it says. Read what it says. Read what it says.
Well, it says we should destroy the part of the embassy that was being used to listen for espionage. But I mean, if you were to carry through the shock and horror, that is exactly how one should behave.
Which they will never do. So you said about the a minima reaction. I mean, there was a bit of a show, and we're getting the ambassador to do, I don't know, 500 meters and come to the foreign office and talk with Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, and there is this cabinet meeting. All this is a show in order to say to the broader French public, yes, we take this seriously. But it was a common.
And might I add, a show perhaps perhaps to distract from some very basic and clear hypocrisies. France unveils changes to the Statue of Liberty, two nations that supposedly represent liberty, and now we're in a completely different era where liberty has to be balanced with surveillance, and you can see there the statue.
Built the Statue of Liberty.
Which was offered by France to the US.
Indeed, and there it is, being reimagined for 2015, I suppose you could say. And then we've had all of the coverage of this law, the law on loi renseignement. How are we even calling it in English? The
French intelligence bill,
or the French
would call it the French
Patriot Act. Just to read this article in Numerama, during the negotiations for the final text, 14 senators and MPs in the Parliament added a disposition depriving foreigners and exiles of the same protections that French citizens benefit from in terms of breach of their privacy, which is against international law and against human rights law. And again, you have in this article the image of liberty leading the people. So this image of liberty is taking a bit of a knock today, François, in terms of what we're seeing in the French Parliament, but also these revelations regarding France leaks.
All right, James Creedon, many thanks. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 Debate.